Well, I cannot believe this. We're already at the end of Chapter 4. Oh yeah, Happy New Year, by the way. When it comes to most firearms, energy weapons, you can copy whatever's available in Half-Life and simply change how it works. But sometimes you just gotta figure things out on your own without a weapon to base your logic on, and that's where the real fun starts, in my opinion. Before I continue, I do gotta say sorry to the folks whose ideas I couldn't implement, either because I couldn't find the assets for it, or I forgot, or they just required knowledge from the next chapters. You know, I'm just lazy, and I'm not gonna hide that, but you know, some of these may be good ideas for Half-Life SDK extras, so there's always that. So, a lot of people want to see a flamethrower, or Flammenwerfer, or Batsach Plamena, whatever you want to call it. Really, pretty sure my babushka would call it Batsach Plamena, but I digress. Fundamentally, the idea is that we're gonna continuously spawn sprites. So basically, this is a projectile weapon, and most of the logic would be in the projectile itself. It's worth noting that this uses server-side sprites, so this uses up edicts, and it's pretty inefficient in multiplayer. You would ideally spawn these particles in the client side and try to match the server's, like, movement logic, while the server just, you know, deals with invisible logical boxes. But for a single-player mod, this is gonna work just fine. There is plenty of stuff we can do in terms of aesthetics. Team Fortress Classic uses a particular sprite, and we could do the same. We could also spawn, I don't know, some smoke when the projectile evaporates, or we could spawn some fire on the floor. We could make NPCs burn when they catch one of these as well. And yeah, sure, let's actually do that. One of the simplest ways to approach it is quite simply to check if the NPC is about to lose all of its remaining health. If so, delete the NPC entity and spawn a bunch of debris gibs and attach like a fire sprite to them. Now, Christopher D wants to see something like an ender pearl. Well, here's the thing. Last time I played Minecraft, I think the latest version was like 1.7.10, and I remember 1.8 just barely came out. I kind of forgot how they work, but if I remember well, you know, ender pearls would allow you to teleport, but also guide you to, I think, the ender portal one way or another. So let's try to adapt this to Half-Life. Primary attack will teleport you, and the secondary attack will lead you to, well, I don't know, scientists, I guess. We're gonna name it the Telepearl, and for now, let's just use the snark view model. Teleportation is fairly simple. Wherever the pearl lands, we just snap the player there, and maybe do that Half-Life teleportation effect. We could make it so that if the pearl hits an NPC, the player just insta-gips them. That would be very cool. Now, looking for items is a pretty fun one. Half-Life has a node graph, and we could, you know, utilize its A-star pathfinding to do that, but we haven't reached the AI chapter just yet. Let's just do the cheap alternative of using trace lines and stuff like that, and we just float towards the, I guess, nearest item of interest and falling on the ground if we're close enough or we encounter an obstacle. Rogers wants to see a grappling gun. Oh, hell yes. Me too, actually. Here's the thing. So I could cheap out and just copy the opposing force barnacle code and make it able to use any surface, like not just specifics and textures, like sure. But honestly, that's kind of lame. Let's make something interesting, you know? I've been playing Voices of the Void for some time, and some controversies aside, I think its hook item is really fun, so let's copy that. Yes. So in VOTV, you basically throw the hook, and once it's attached, you can use your mouse wheel to retract and extend the cord. In other words, get yourself closer and further from the, hook. In Half-Life, the mouse wheel is typically reserved for weapon selection, and I don't want to compromise on that. So here's an alternative control scheme. You're going to press the left mouse button to cast the hook. Once attached, you can press R to disengage the hook, while pressing one of the two mouse buttons, left or right, will retract and extend the rope, and that should be very easy to do. We can spawn a projectile that basically sticks itself to any world geometry. The only real question is, how do we actually implement the physical/mathematical aspect of all this? And the answer is quite simple. When the hook sticks itself to a surface, we calculate the distance to it, and then all we gotta do is ensure that the player is within that distance, not further away. Okay? So if the player is further away, we're going to add a little bit of velocity to push the player closer to the center of this sphere, so to speak, around the hook. The rope may have certain amounts of elasticity, which will affect how much force we're going to apply here. And what we've implemented is basically some type of physical constraint. You can find algorithms like these as existing components within physics engines. In Gmod or Source, these are things like ball sockets, welds, and so on. There's like various constraints in there, distance constraints, angular constraints, hinges, and stuff like that. Meanwhile, over here, we're just kind of hard coding it, doing it all manually. And Sub-Zero Catalyst wants to see a Physgun. Oh boy, this is getting real good. Let's combine this into a gravity gun and Physgun in one. So pressing R is going to make it cycle between the two modes, and that's fairly easy to do. Starting with the gravity gun mode, primary attack will just raycast forward and push an entity acquired by the raycast. Very simple. Now, what happens in secondary attack is a bit interesting. All we do is just raycast, acquire an entity, and store it in the weapon if it's close enough. If it's far away, sure, let's bring it a bit closer to us. And if it's already stored, the player probably wants to release it. Then, in Weapon Idle, we're going to attract the stored entity until it's pushed or released. Now, as far as the Physgun mode goes, well, it's a little different. Primary attack is going to raycast as usual, but upon acquiring an entity, we will immediately memorize just how far away it is. This is pretty important because when you move your mouse, your crosshair will point, left, right, up and down, and you're going to need to move the entity somewhere while maintaining that same distance. In other words, you want to move the entity within a sphere around the player. We can now interpolate the entity's position to wherever the player aims. That part is very simple. We can also spawn beams for all of this, something we've covered near the end of Chapter 3, and that's something I'll leave to you as homework. And there we go. We've done it. Chapter 4 is basically done. In Chapter 5, we're going to talk all about NPCs, AI, and similar stuff. And this year is going to be rather exciting. After Chapter 5, we got one more involving the HUD, networking, VGUI, and stuff, and the series is basically done. I cannot believe it. So yeah, until then, happy programming.
Sweep formation. Affirmative, sir.